Hey all, welcome to Recurring Insight. It's the beginning of your upkeep, so it's time for another episode. I'm your host, Michael, and let's dive in. Today we take a look at Tameshi, who was a new commander from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set. I was hyped when I first saw him and have since put a lot of hours into building a list for him. I haven't really seen any lists take Tameshi in the direction I'm trying to go with him, and I feel like he has a lot of potential, to the point of being a tier 1 commander. The link to the deck will be in the description. Without further ado, let's take a look at how this deck wins. First up is the primary win condition for the deck. You can target Tameshi with Polymorph or Proteus Staff in order to put Hullbreaker Horror from your library onto the field. If you've got 2 permanents that combined are mana positive, you can use the Hullbreaker trigger for 1 to return the other to hand. Then tap your rock for mana and recast the original, returning the other one to your hand. Repeat this ad infinitum to get infinite mana. Once you have infinite mana, establish infinite colored mana with your other rocks. Then bring Tameshi into the loop. Although his first ability only triggers once each turn, if you bounce him with a Hullbreaker trigger and replay him, he'll be a new object. This means you can get the draw trigger again. Just rinse and repeat as necessary. This combo does cut you off of creatures, but the colors we're in means we aren't missing too much. There are creatures that I would have liked to run, but our synergy is with artifacts and enchantments. Speaking of which, let's take a look at how far we can push that synergy. Tameshi's ability presents an interesting puzzle that requires you to solve for the land returning to hand, as well as the mana cost of the ability. Azorius doesn't really have any good options to put a land directly onto the battlefield besides Walking Atlas, which is subpar and a creature, but it has an alternative. If the land is an artifact land, you can cast Copy Artifact and have it enter as a copy of it. I personally prefer Ancient Den over Seed of the Synod, so Copy Artifact taps for a white and our mana source produces blue. Anyways, you now have a land that you can replay without using a land drop. Now that we've got a way to infinitely recur artifacts or enchantments, we need a payoff that sacrifices itself and nets us at least 3 mana more than its CMC to pay to recast Copy Artifact. 2 options come to mind, Lotus Bloom and LED. I really wish Lotus Bloom worked, but we don't have any good ways to discard it, so Tutors to the field are the only option. I am working on a Staxier version of Tameshi and am testing it there, but in this deck, we're already accommodating Hullbreaker and Tameshi. We don't have much room to work with. I don't like that LED causes us to discard our hand, but at least we can count on being able to use it. Additionally, the commander serves as recursion, so we're built to deal with it. Bada bing, bada boom, there's our combo. I haven't seen another list running the combo, but it's still early stages for the commander yet. For the video, I'm referring to it as the Mirage combo, since LED was printed in Mirage and the combo hinges on Copy Artifact becoming a copy of a land. It's typically assembled with Intuition. Copy Artifact is the worst option to be given to hand since you'll need the more color restrictive 1 generic, 1 white, and 1 blue versus the 1 white and 2 generic you'd pay with Copy Artifact in the yard. No matter what you're given, you also need at least 2 lands on the battlefield for Ancient Den to kick things off. This is the cost of the safest line of the combo and the line that requires us bouncing the least lands. If something gets removed before we crack LED, we can wait a turn and regroup. This list is pretty interactive and Tameshi is a draw engine, so the deck is fine with grinding. At some point though, you've gotta crack LED. Even though we discard our hand, we can power through a decent bit of interaction once we get the ball rolling. Each piece that's removed just costs a white, the mana value of the piece in generic, and returning a land to hand. If Tameshi is removed, that's a little trickier, but you can typically get through it. You will need another 5 mana to recast Tameshi. However, since you've got LED, if you can land Tameshi on the field, you can return a land to your hand to get LED back after cracking it, allowing you to essentially trade in a land for 2 mana. You'll typically be able to, since people can't respond to you cracking LED. This means that you will always be able to sequence it so that when removal is played, we either haven't cracked LED, the ability to recur LED is on the stack, or we have Copy Artifact in hand and LED on the field. In the first scenario, you don't have Tameshi, but you still have your hand. In the second and third, you can replay Copy Artifact as a copy of LED. It's only a small boost, and you'll need another 2 lands to return to hand to get the pieces out of the yard and continue comboing, but it means that if you have 2 generic, 1 blue, 2 white, and 4 lands, you'll always be able to combo through one non-exiling removal spell. Having a piece countered is definitely worse, since you won't be able to activate the permanent in response. Now, this requirement isn't hard and fast. I mentioned earlier that we can use LED to trade a land in for 2 mana. This line is more fragile, but instead of setting up, you can do that right off the bat. You can spend as little as 1 mana by bouncing 3 lands to hand. This opens up the possibility of a main phase intuition and more. Maybe you've drawn into 2 of the pieces and need a tutor for the last one, or need to remove a stacks piece and are just short on mana. It's not something I would always recommend since you'll be binning a lot of lands. If things don't pan out, you'll be hellbent and without a land base. This is still an LED combo, and like the others, whiffing will leave you in a terrible position, but it can be minimized with the more costly lines we covered earlier. Eventually though, you're going to have to crack LED, and the ability to spend mana and lands to keep comboing does make this very resilient for an LED combo. What do we do here with infinite mana? Well, in a vacuum, nothing. You need another artifact or enchantment that sacrifices itself to take the place of LED in the loop. However, we run a decent amount of these pieces because they work very well with Tameshi on their own, so it's rare that you won't have at least one in the yard. I'll make sure to point out which pieces would work as we go through the rest of the deck. The pieces draw your deck, so we do still need something to end the game. The deck wins by looping a spell infinite times. I'll point out the loops and the finishers as well. Now that we've looked at what the goal is, let's look at how the deck plans to do it, starting with stopping other decks. Chain and Rift are both staples. Chain is cheap and Rift can serve as a board wipe. These 2 pieces are all-stars. Although they do require a preemptive investment and can only hit creatures, Tameshi allows you to reuse them. Ether Spellbomb can also serve as a cantrip. Most of our tutors can also find this, and between serving as an engine or removal, this is a great target if we aren't in a position to find Proteus Staff. They can also serve as pseudo stacks pieces, since players can see them and will likely wait for someone else to take the hit, or until they can deal with it. Both of these work with the Mirage combo. The first 2 only make the cut because Tameshi cares about bounce spells, but also in part because of the Hullbreaker line. Hullbreaker requires you to cast a spell to start the loop, so it's a real possibility that you'll be bouncing one of your own pieces to set up the spell to start the loop. You can also save one of your pieces from exile, but there aren't too many removal spells you need to worry about. Worst case scenario though, they're generic 2 mana bounce spells in a deck that cantrips off of them. Winds of Rebuke can blank our opponent's top of deck tutors and can mill us, which we're okay with since Tameshi has built-in recursion. Occasionally you'll hit an important non-artifact or enchantment piece, but this also serves as a finisher in one of our infinite spell loops, which we'll get to later on. Odawara has a very low opportunity cost. If I wasn't running it, I'd be running an island. Although you normally have to decide whether to play it as a land or use it as removal, Tameshi can return it to hand whenever you're ready, making it much better. Finally, we've got 2 removal spells that aren't on brand. Fragmentize is limited by the CMC of the target, but it hits virtually every relevant target in the meta. Swords to Plowshares is narrow, but it also exiles for just 1 mana. I included these because I'm not comfortable with only running bounce spells as removal. This deck is vulnerable to artifact, graveyard, and creature hate, so we want to be able to permanently deal with things like oof effects that not only prevent us from winning, but from playing the game at all. Additionally, although we don't want the game to go too long, we're comfortable grinding, so we need to be prepared and bounce spells won't cut it. This one isn't really removal, but removal is the best category for it. Soul Guide Lantern can serve as graveyard hate or card draw. It also serves as an outlet for the Mirage combo and ensures that Winds of Rebuke can be used as a finisher against decks that run shuffle effects. Let's move from the field to the stack. We run the staples because they're staples for a reason. These spells may not be truly free, but they're close enough. These ones aren't free at all, but they're staples for a reason. Swansong is a finisher with our infinite loops. Although you do need to wait a turn, you just drew your library, so you can just stack your hand with interaction and pass. Miscast is kind of a staple. It's excluded from more grindy decks, and although we can do that well, Tameshi's ability typically has us operating on very thin margins mana-wise. However, we still run some 2 mana interaction. Although Dovin's Veto is pricey for a counterspell that only hits non-creature spells, it's uncounterable. It's only average when protecting our spells, but against someone else's spell or to protect one of our permanents, it's amazing. Muddle the Mixture is one of 3 tutors that can find copy artifact for us, so although it's pricey, it still makes it in. Narset's Reversal allows us to steal a spell or copy one of ours while returning it to hand. It also enables Twister loops, since you can cast Time Twister, cast Narset's Reversal, and by the time the copy of Twister resolves, both Reversal and the original Twister will be shuffled back into your library. Between being one of the rare pieces of proactive interaction and enabling Twister loops, it makes the cut. Now that we've looked at how the deck stops others from winning and protects its own game plan, let's see how the deck fuels itself. We run the best engines and mass draw Azorius has to offer. Mystic Remora is especially good in this deck since we can just keep bringing it back. It doesn't benefit us mana-wise until you hit the 3rd age counter, but I still love having the option to pay 2 mana each turn and return a land every 3rd turn to keep it around. We can take advantage of Time Twister better than most decks since we're designed to dump our hands, and it serves as a sort of recursion. It's also our secondary infinite loop with Narset's Reversal. Your opponents will get their hands refilled, but we run Silence, so you should be fine. Windfall isn't as strong, but it will put our hands in the yard, giving us the opportunity to recur whatever we want. You can also use Windfall as a finisher in conjunction with Time Twister and Soul Guide Lantern, since you can cast Windfall to have everybody discard their hands, then exile their yards. Twister it up and their decks will be slightly smaller. Eventually, they'll draw out. Then we've got the cantrips. These are staples and we have no reason to exclude them. Preordained did catch the axe though. Ultimately, there just wasn't space for it. Both the Mirage and Hullbreaker combos require a good bit of building around, and although the cards required are good here anyways, we do have to make certain sacrifices. Preordained got cut because Brainstorm and Ponder are just better, while Jataxian Probe is a free spell to trigger Hullbreaker if necessary. We run these despite them making us wait to draw because they help the Hullbreaker combo and they work well with Tameshi. You can also use them for the Mirage combo, but you won't draw your library until the next upkeep. The Chromatic Rocks and Conjurer's Bauble make it in for parallel reasoning. It works with the Mirage combo and with Tameshi. Sphere and Star only cost 1 mana in practice, and since Tameshi feeds off your land base, the color fixing will likely be relevant often as well. Conjurer's Bauble serves as bad recursion in addition to cantripping, which enables it to serve as our primary infinite loop. If you've got infinite mana and your library in hand, you should have access to an artifact land and copy artifact, which will provide infinite artifact recursion. This means you can infinitely crack Conjurer's Bauble to infinitely recur any card that goes to the yard when it resolves or sacrifices itself. If you have access to it, I prefer this to the Twister loop since you don't have to constantly refill your opponent's hands. We also run Cephalid Coliseum. We can really churn through our deck, and most of the cards we want to recur have sacrifice abilities, so we'll be able to hit the threshold pretty easily. It's also got low opportunity cost. Like I mentioned earlier, we run Ether Spellbomb and Soul Guide Lantern. Next up we've got the Tutors, and there are a decent amount considering our color identity. A lot of this is due to the variety of combos we run, since we can assemble a win with Intuition, Polymorph, and Proteus Staff, so a tutor for an instant, sorcery, or artifact will get us there. We've also got the staples, not much to see here. Then we've got the artifact tutors. Fabricate is more expensive, but we need tutors and this is viable. Inventor's Fair and Urza's Saga are low opportunity cost, really only affecting how many other colorless lands we can run. Urza's Saga doesn't grab a combo, but it will grab a rock for the Hullbreaker combo, the artifact land or LED for the Mirage combo, or any other cheap artifact. Even better, Tameshi can recur it once it gets sacrificed. Whir of Invention is instant speed, allowing us to get out from under Rule of Law effects by finding Proteus Staff on an end step, activating it on our turn, and using the Hullbreaker trigger from our first spell of the turn to bounce the Rule of Law effect. We also run a decent amount of artifacts that aren't mana rocks, so we can take advantage of it having Improvise. Then we've got the tutors for instants and sorceries. Merchant Scroll is used to find Intuition, Interaction, or for tutor chains. Personal Tutor is a sorcery, but with Tameshi's ability and the number of cantrips we run, we can normally draw the card right away. It typically finds Polymorph, a wheel, or another tutor. Solve the Equation is relatively expensive, but it's one of the more versatile tutors we have. It normally finds either Intuition or Polymorph. The Recursion is pretty lacking. That's because we don't run any. Our commander is already Recursion and we're on Hullbreaker, so we really only miss out on bringing back instants and sorceries. The two best in our colors are Mystic Sanctuary and Snapcaster Mage, but our land base won't be able to support Sanctuary and Snapcaster is a creature. We could run Flood of Recollection or Mission Briefing, but they're pretty color restrictive and expensive for narrow recursion. We don't run too much stacks either. Most builds I've seen of Tameshi are pretty stacks focused, but we're more proactive. We still run Dress Down, which doesn't really feel like stacks, but it fits better here than in the removal section. It can blank creature-based combos and cantrips, which means we can use it as a repeated source of card draw. Overburden also serves as a card draw engine with Tameshi. This can backfire if you're playing against Chulane or if an opponent has Cradle out, but it's too good to cut. Next, let's take a look at the foundation of the deck. We run a high amount of ramp since between drawing a lot of cards and Tameshi feeding on our lands, we need it. First, we've got the free staples. If you're worried about Tameshi catching removal, you can recur Jeweled Lotus. Mox Diamond also has utility when we're trying to win with Hullbreaker. If you've already drawn your library and want to use the Conjurer's Bauble Loop but don't have your land drop nor an artifact land on the field or in the yard, you can use Mox Diamond to bin one so you can recur it. We run the other mana positive rocks. Mana Vault is especially good since it and any of the 2 CMC rocks are mana positive for the Hullbreaker combo. It's not typically a problem for us since we run so many Cheerios, but still, if I'm tutoring to find a rock for the combo, I'm finding either this or Mana Crypt. These aren't mana positive, but they're still good. Smothering Tithe is expensive for us, but the additional ramp is invaluable to sort of negating the effect of Tameshi on our land base. I didn't think this one would see any cEDH play, but here we are. Archaeomancer's map finding basic planes can be helpful, but we primarily run it for the second ability, since it can help repair the damage we do to our land base. It's honestly one of the most powerful cards outside of the combos. If you can land it in one of the cheaper engines, you're going to have a fun time. Speaking of land ramp, although we lack green, we still get Ancient Tomb and Gemstone Caverns. Azorius Signet mostly makes it in for density, but it serving as a mana filter is pretty nice as well. These Cheerios aren't staples per se, but they still see a decent amount of play. We have a relatively cheap commander for Mox Amber and run enough artifacts to trigger Mox Opal pretty easily. Jeweled Amulet does a good job of getting Tameshi out and works well with the play pattern of the deck. Finally, we've got the cards that don't really fit into any of the other categories. Since we're on Hullbreaker, we can't run Phantasmal Image, but Imposter Mech is a close second. If the crew cost was 2, it'd be a lot better, since we'll realistically never hit 3 power unless Hullbreaker is on the field, but it's still good. Treasure Vault can be used in the Mirage combo, but it is a little clunkier than Seed of the Synod or Ancient Den. It can also be used to filter colorless mana from the Hullbreaker combo into infinite colored mana. That covers the cards in the list. Now let's take a look at the overall game plan of the deck. The list is significantly more proactive than most of the builds I've seen out in the wild. Instead of using Tameshi as recursion for when one of our stacks pieces is removed, we actively seek out cheap pieces that crack themselves to turn into engines. Even if we don't recur them, the pieces either draw us a card or our interaction, so they're not dead cards without Tameshi. There is some opportunity cost, since we eschew some stronger cards for these since these are better with Tameshi, but it's a relatively small cost. The main concern is our land base. Tameshi feeds off of our lands, which puts us in a delicate but sustainable position. The main reason we activate Tameshi is to draw cards, and if we're trying to draw cards, we most likely don't have anything proactive to play, so the mana isn't too much of an issue. However, you have to plan a few turns out to make sure you aren't going to end up short on mana when you need it. That being said, it still affects our mulligan decisions. Our main concern with our opening hands is the ramp. We need to be able to get Tameshi online quickly and deal with the damage to our land base. Besides the ramp, you need an engine, tutor, or wheel. We run 20 pieces of ramp, 10 engines, 14 tutors, and 2 wheels. This gives us plenty of margin for our opening hands. We care about lands, but we only run 28. Tameshi returns lands to hand, so we're more likely to end up with unnecessary lands. He's also a draw engine, which increases our odds of drawing a land. All in all, I think he's one of the more powerful commanders. This list is still a work in progress, but I'm excited to see what people do with him. Anyways, that wraps it up. I was hyped to work on Tameshi, he's been a lot of fun. If you want to try the list or have your own, feel free to let me know how it performs in the comments. The link to the list is in the description. This week's video was supposed to be the 5-color deck tech featuring Kenrith, Najeela, and Sisay, but I got too excited about Tameshi, so that'll be the video next week. If you'd like input on the topics of future videos, my socials are in the description. I run polls on my Twitter. If you enjoyed the video or list, please drop a like or subscribe. Thank you all for watching. I'm your host Michael, and I'll see you at the beginning of your next upkeep for another episode of Recurring Insight.